Hello, how are you? Hope you're well. I hope you're enjoying the Solitaire mystery. And I haven't pointed out his name. It's Justin Garda, and you might have guessed that he's Norwegian. So I think this has been translated from Norwegian, and that's why we got some funny names and all the place names. Okay, we get to the Four of Spades. By the time we got back down to Dorf, it was already late afternoon. It'd be good to have a meal now, said Dad. The large restaurant was open, so we didn't have to creep into the little dining room. Excuse me. A number of locals sat round one of the tables with tankards of beer. We ate sausages and Swiss sauerkraut, and for dessert we had a kind of apple pie with whipped cream. Sauerkraut is a kind of cabbage dish, as I remember. After we'd finished eating, Dad stayed at the table to taste the Alpine brandy, as he put it. I thought this was so boring to watch that I took a fizzy drink and went up to our room. Here I read for the last time the same Norwegian comic books I had read 10 or 20 times before. Then I began to play Solitaire. I started a 7-card game twice, but both times I got stuck almost as soon as I dealt out the cards, so I went down back to the restaurant. I thought I'd try to get Dad up to the room before he got too drunk to tell stories from the Seven Seas, but he clearly hadn't finished tasting the Alpine brandy. Moreover, he'd started to speak German with some of the locals. You can go for a walk and look round the town if you want, he told me. I thought it was mean of him not to come with me, but today I'm glad I did as he said. I think I was born under a luckier star than Dad. Does this mean that it's all starting to happen? To look around the town took exactly 5 minutes. It was so small. It consisted of one main street called Waldemarstrasse. The people of Dorf weren't very inventive. I was pretty angry with Dad for sitting around drinking Alpine brandy with the locals. Alpine brandy! Somehow it sounded better than alcohol. Once Dad had said it wasn't good for his health to stop drinking, I went round repeating this sentence to myself many times before I understood it. Normally, people say the opposite. But Dad can be thought of as a rare exception. He wasn't the illegitimate child of a German soldier for nothing. All the shops in the village were closed, but a red van drove up to a grocery shop to make a delivery. A Swiss girl played ball against a brick wall, and an old man sat on a bench under a large tree, smoking his pipe. But that was it. Although there were a lot of fine fairy tale houses here, I thought the little Alpine village was incredibly boring. I couldn't understand why I needed a magnifying glass either. The only thing that kept me in a good mood was knowing we would be driving on the next morning. Sometime in the afternoon or evening, we would reach Italy, and from there we would drive through Yugoslavia to Greece, and in Greece we might find Mama. Thinking about it gave me butterflies in my stomach. I walked across the street to a little bakery. It was the only shop window I hadn't looked in. Next to a tray of old cakes was a glass bowl with one lonely goldfish inside. There was a big chip in the upper edge of the bowl, about the same size as the magnifying glass I'd got from the mysterious little man at the garage. I pulled the magnifying glass out of my pocket, removed its cover, and examined it closely. It was just a bit smaller than the chip in this bowl. The tiny orange goldfish was swimming round and round inside the glass bowl. Probably lived on cake crumbs. I thought that maybe a roe deer had tried to eat the goldfish, but it had taken a little bite from the bowl instead. All of a sudden, the evening sun shone through the little window and lit up the glass bowl. Then I saw the fish wasn't just orange. It was red, yellow, and green. Both the glass and the water in the bowl were tinted by the fish now, all the colours from a paint box at once. The more I stared at the fish, the glass, and the water, the more I forgot where I was. For a few seconds, I thought I was the fish swimming around inside the bowl, and the fish was outside gazing at me. As I stared at the fish in the glass bowl, I suddenly noticed an old man with white hair standing behind the counter inside the bakery. He looked down at me and waved for me to come inside. I thought it was a little odd that this bakery should be open in the evening. First, I glanced back at the Schöner Waldemar to see if Dad had finished drinking his Alpine brandy. But when I didn't see him, I opened the door to the bakery and stepped inside. "Grüß Gott," I said politely. It was the only thing I'd learnt to say in Swiss German, and it meant "praise be to God," or something like that. I could tell at once that the baker was a kind man. "Norwegian," I said, beating my chest so he'd understand I didn't speak his language. The old man leaned over a wide marble counter and stared into my eyes. Sorry, understand what that was. Look, what that word, relic? Don't know what that is. Probably word. He said, I have also lived in Norway many, many years ago, and now I have almost all my Norwegian forgotten." He turned round and opened an old fridge. He took out a bottle, opened it, and put it on the counter. "And you like fizzy drinks?" he said. "Nicht, Vater? There you go, my younger friend. It is a sehr good fizzy drink." I placed the bottle to my lips and took a few gulps. It tasted even better than the drink I'd had at the Schöner Waldemar. I think it was a pear flavour. The white-haired old man bent over the marble counter again and whispered, "It tastes good, ja?" "Delicious," I replied. "Jawohl," he whispered again. "It is a sehr good drink, and there is another fizzy drink to be found here in Dorf. It is even better. But that soda isn't sold over counter. First is you?" I nodded. He whispered so strangely I was almost scared. But then I looked up into his blue eyes, and they were truly kind. "I come from Arundel," I said. "Dad and I are on our way to Greece to find Mama. Unfortunately, she got lost in the fashion world." He looked at me sharply. "Such you Arundel, my friend, and get lost? There are perhaps others who have the same done. I have some years in that grim start lived, but they have probably me there forgotten." This is very difficult to read. I looked up at him. Had he really lived in Grimstad? It was Grimstad. Oh, yeah. That was our neighbouring town. Dad and I used to go there by boat during the summer. "That's not that far from our Arundel," I stuttered. No. And I knew that a younger Jack one day here to Dorf would come to collect the treasure, my friend. Now it is no longer just mine." Suddenly I heard Dad calling me. I could tell by his voice he'd had plenty of Alpine brandy. "Thank you very much for the drink," I said, "but I have to go now. Dad's calling." "Warte ja, aber natürlich, my friend. Wait doch a little. While you were here at the fish looking, A tray of buns in the oven, I put. I saw you had the magnifying glass. Then I knew that you, the right Jack, were. You will wirst dahin, my son. You will wirst dahin. The old baker disappeared into a back room. A minute later he returned with 4 freshly baked sticky buns, which he put into a paper bag. He gave me the bag and said sternly, "No, an important thing you must promise me. You will hide the biggest sticky bun till last and eat it when you are completely alone. You must never say anything to anyone else. Wirst that you?" "Of course," I said, "and thank you very much." The next moment I was back out on the street. Everything happened so fast I don't remember anything before I met Dad between the little bakery and the Skåne Valdemar. I told him I'd got a fizzy drink and 4 sticky buns from an old baker who'd emigrated from Grimstad. Dad probably thought I was just making it up, but he ate one of the sticky buns on the way back to the guest house. I ate 2. I hid the biggest sticky bun in the bag. Dad fell asleep as soon as he lay down on the bed. I lay awake thinking about the old baker and the goldfish. In the end, I was so hungry I got out of bed and fetched the bag with the last sticky bun. I sat on a chair in the dark and bit into the bun. Suddenly, my teeth hit something hard. I tore away the bits of bun and discovered an object the size of a matchbox. Dad lay snoring on his bed. I turned on a light by the chair. What I held in my hands was a little book. On the cover was written, "The Rainbow Fizz and the Magic Island." I began to look through the book. Although it was extremely small, it had over 100 pages of minuscule writing. I turned to the first page and tried to read the tiny letters, but it was absolutely impossible. You know what's coming, don't you? Then I remembered the magnifying glass I'd got from the little man at the garage. I fetched my jeans, found the magnifying glass in the green cover in one of the pockets, and put it over the letters on the first page. They were still very small, but as soon as I leaned over the magnifying glass, they were just big enough for me to read. Really about halfway, which means I can carry on to chapter 5 of Spades. And this is the start of the book, I think. Dear son, I must be allowed to call you that. I'm sitting here writing my life story, knowing that one day you'll come to the village. Maybe you'll wander by the bakery in Valdemarstrasse, and stand in front of the goldfish bowl. You won't even know why you've come, but I know you'll come to Dorf to carry on the story of the Rainbow Fizz and the Magic Island. I'm writing this in January 1946. That's even before I was born. And I am still a young man. When you meet me in 30 or 40 years' time, I will be old with white hair. So I am also writing for a day to come. The paper I'm writing on is like a life raft, my unknown son. A life raft can drift with the wind and rain before sailing towards the ocean in the distance. But some rafts sail a totally different course. They sail towards the land of tomorrow. From there is no return. How do I know you are the one to carry the story further? I will be able to tell you when you come towards me, son. You will carry the sign. I'm writing in Norwegian so you will understand, but also so that the people of Dorf cannot read the story of the dwarfs. If that were to happen, the secret of the magic island would be a sensation. but a sensation is always the same as a piece of news, and a piece of news never lives long. It captures attention for one day, then it's forgotten. But the story of the dwarfs must never drown in the temporary sparkle of the news. It is better for only one person to know the secret of the dwarfs rather than for everybody to forget it. I was one of the many who sought a new place to live after the terrible war. Half of Europe was immediately transformed into a refugee camp. A large part of the world was under the shadow of an exodus. But we weren't only political refugees. We were lost souls looking for ourselves. I too had to leave Germany to build a new life for myself, but there weren't so many possibilities of escape for a non-commissioned officer of the Third Reich. I didn't just find myself in a broken nation. I had brought home a broken heart from the land in the north. The whole world lay strewn about me in pieces. I knew I couldn't live in Germany, but I couldn't travel back to Norway either. In the end, I managed to get myself over the mountains to Switzerland. I roamed around for several weeks in a state of confusion, but in Dorf I soon met the old baker, Albert Klages. Klages. I was on my way down from the mountains when, exhausted by hunger and many long days of wandering, I suddenly saw a small village. Hunger made me run like a hunted animal down through the dense woodland, and I soon collapsed in front of an old wooden cabin. There I heard the humming of bees and could smell the sweet aroma of milk and honey. The old baker must have managed to carry me inside the cabin, and when I woke on a bunk, I saw a man with white hair sitting in a rocking chair, smoking a pipe. And when he saw that I'd opened my eyes, he came and sat next to me at once. "You've come home, dear son," he said comfortingly. "I knew that one day you'd come to my door to collect the treasure, my boy." That's exactly what the baker said to Hans. I must have fallen asleep again, and when I next awoke, I was alone in the cabin. I got up and went out onto the front steps. Here I found the old man sitting bent over a strong stone table. On the heavy tabletop was a beautiful glass bowl. Inside the bowl swam a colourful goldfish. It immediately struck me how odd it was that a little fish from far away could swim around so happily here, high up in the mountains, in the middle of Europe. A piece of the living ocean had been lifted up to the Swiss Alps. "Grüß Gott," I greeted the old man. He turned round and looked up at me kindly. "My name is Ludwig, and I am Albert Klages," he replied. He went inside the cabin, but soon came out into the sunshine carrying some bread, cheese, milk, and honey. He pointed down to the village and told me that it was called Dorf, and that he owned a little bakery there. I lived with the old man a few weeks, and I soon began to join him in the bakery. Albert taught me to bake bread and sticky buns, pastries, and all kinds of cakes. I'd always heard that the Swiss were great bakers. Albert was particularly happy to have some help stacking the heavy sacks of flour. I also wanted to meet other people from the village, and so I would sometimes visit the old pub called the Skåne Valdemar. I think the locals took a liking to me. Although they understood that I had been a German soldier, none of them asked me any questions about my past. One evening, someone in the pub started to talk about Albert, who had been so kind to me. "Oh, he has a screw loose," said the farmer, Fritz Andre. "But so did the previous baker," continued the old shopkeeper, Heinrich Albrecht. When I joined in the conversation and asked them what they meant, they answered evasively at first. I had drunk a few carafes of wine, and I could feel my cheeks glowing. If you can't give me a direct answer, then you can at least take back your malicious gossip about the man who bakes the bread that you eat, I spat out. Nothing more was said about Albert that evening, but a few weeks later, Fritz piped up again. Do you know where he gets all his goldfish from? He asked. I had noticed that the village locals showed particular interest in me because I lived with the old baker. I didn't know there was more than one, I replied truthfully, and he probably bought them from a pet shop in Zurich, perhaps. The farmer and the shopkeeper both started to laugh. He has lots more, said the farmer. Once my father was out hunting, and on his way home he came across Albert airing his goldfish. He had put them out in the sunshine all together, and there were more than just a few of them, mark my words, baker boy. He's never been outside Dorf either, added the shopkeeper. We are exactly the same age, and as far as I know, he's never left Dorf. Some people say he's a wizard, whispered the farmer. They claim he doesn't only bake bread and cakes, but he makes these fish himself. One thing is sure, he didn't catch them in Waldemarsee. I also began to wonder whether Albert was really hiding a big secret. A couple of sentences constantly rang in my ears. You've come home, dear son. I knew that one day you'd come to my door to collect the treasure, my boy. I didn't want to hurt the old baker's feelings by repeating any of the village's gossip. If he was hiding a secret, I was sure he would tell me when the time was right. Let's hope I've got enough time to read the next 2 pages. For a long time, I thought the reason there was so much gossip about the old baker was simply that he lived on his own, high above the village itself. But there was also something about the old house which got me thinking. As soon as you stepped into the house, you were in a large living room with a fireplace and a kitchen corner. There were 2 doors leading from the living room, one to Albert's bedroom and the other to a little bedroom I'd been given the use of when I had arrived in Dorf. The rooms didn't have particularly high ceilings, but when I observed the house from the outside, it was obvious that there must be a large attic. Moreover, from the crest of the hill behind the house, I could see a little window in the slate roof. It was strange that Albert had never said anything about this attic, and he was never up there either. This is probably why I thought of the attic whenever my friends mentioned Albert. Then, one evening, I happened to come home late from Dorf, and I heard the old man walking around in the attic. I was so surprised, and possibly a little scared too, that I immediately ran outside to fetch some water from the pump. I took my time, and when I went back inside, Albert was sitting in his rocking chair, smoking his pipe. You're late, he said, but I felt as though he was thinking about something completely different. Were you up in the attic? I asked. I didn't know how I dared ask, but it just slipped out. He seemed to sink into his chair, but then he looked up with the same kind face he'd had when he had taken care of me that day many months ago, when I had collapsed with exhaustion outside the old house. Are you tired, Ludwig? He asked. I shook my head. It was a Saturday evening. The next day we could sleep until the sun woke us. He got up and threw some logs into the fire. Then we'll sit together tonight, he said. All a bit odd. Right, okay, that's the end of chapter 5 of Spades. So we'll carry on with chapter 6. And it was just... Right, the next chapter, I've just had a glance. The next chapter is back to Hans again. So, yeah. Love you loads. See you soon. Mwah.